But I was talking to him for maybe 15 minutes. I swear he fell asleep for like toward the end. I told him that he's gonna find, well, he should have found out by now, but he's probably sleeping. So, we'll see. He won't be in tomorrow, I'll tell you that.
You're good, your family's good?
Yes,
You're good, your family's good?
You know, I work in the school, and so my wife works in preschool, so I think we get everything, like, our
Early
early is
on.
pretty, but when we get it, it's bad, so. Yeah, so far, so good.
Okay. Finding setting.
Good evening and welcome to the December meeting of the Granville Schools Board of Education. If you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you for for attending in person as well as online here and so forth. We appreciate the time at this busy time of year. I'll also mention that there's a lot going around these days, including some sickness that has hit our superintendent, Steph Brown, so he's chosen to stay away to keep us all healthier. And there's a lot of that going around the community, in our schools and in any way. So I appreciate all that everyone is doing to keep themselves and all of us healthy through this process. I'd like to start with the roll call.
Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Wolf,
Here.
Ms. Deeds. Here. Ms. Shaw. Here. Ms. O'Day. Here.
Next item is the approval of the agenda, and I will point out there is an addendum with a couple of details to change. If I can get a motion to approve it as amended.
So moved. Second.
Yeah.
Ms. Deeds. Aye. Ms. Shaw. Aye. Ms. O'Day. Aye. Mr. Wolf.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye. And Mr. Renath, if you'd please lead us for the commendations. Thank you.
All right, this evening we'd like to recognize one of our elementary school teachers who was recently surprised in her classroom by Principal Travis Morris, Assistant Principal Tracy Stewart, and Superintendent Jeff Brown for being a leader for learning. This well-deserved award was presented to first grade teacher Terry Applegate. The Leader for Learning honor was launched in 1993 by the Licking County Foundation and is made possible through the Lindorf Warner Memorial Fund. To date, over 375 instructors across Licking County have been honored with this award. All recipients receive $500 awards to further their professional development or purchase classroom materials. Mrs. Applegate was nominated by Principal Morris and selected by the Licking County Foundation for this award for many reasons. As Mr. Morris wrote in his nomination letter, when anyone pictures in their mind the iconic, successful elementary teacher, Terry Applegate is that teacher. She's the teacher that connects with every student. She's the teacher who walks beside each parent in celebration or concern. She's the teacher who generally cares for her colleagues in the school community. Terry's classroom is a peaceful, welcoming one where students are welcomed with carefully chosen plants, apple decor, and the melodic sounds of their teacher's sing-song greeting. The students work with her to develop a family atmosphere where everyone can rely and care for everyone else. Terry seamlessly provides responsive instruction based on the daily needs of her students within her classroom community. She uses literature, music, real-world experiences, establishing effective connections to make learning meaningful and relevant to her students. And who does not learn well from a teacher who sings her lessons? Families who have experienced Mrs. Applegate's love and care unabashedly sing her praises. Whether families are struggling with a difficult period of life, with a child who requires additional supports, or a family is celebrating triumphs, she joins them with genuine sentiment. Families welcome Mrs. Applegate into their close circles because they trust her and she knows she cares. Terry gives the same passion to her students and fellow colleagues as team leader for her first grade teachers. Her passion to refine her own practice demonstrates true learning for life. On a side note, I've worked with Terry for a lot of years now in our district, and I got to see firsthand during the pandemic when she taught our at-home instructors, and that was a classroom that never met and you never would have known the difference. And only a true master caring teacher could pull that off. So Terry, congratulations, well-deserved honor. Please come on up. Thanks. Congratulations, Terry.
My son had her that year.
Oh, that's really, it's really great.
I saw more Christmas trees and pets. Great.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Terry. Appreciate all you do.
Good night.
Next on the agenda is the staff report. Ms. Striello will do them both since Mr. Brown is no longer not here. All right.
While the screen pops up. We have 4 board policies tonight. This is just the first reading, and then you'll approve at the second reading at the next meeting. The first 2 policies are legal changes that are guiding the policy changes. So the first is student pregnancy and related conditions, and that's being dictated by Title IX and is a legally required policy. So we have to adopt that one as is. The second one listed is recruiters in schools. Again, that is being changed based on a legal change from the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 21. So again, a legal compliance item there. The last 2 are strictly just striking 2 legal references, no actual changes to the policy language itself. So pretty easy and straightforward this month. If you have any questions, happy to try to answer those tonight. Otherwise, we can address those at our next meeting in January as well.
Like pretty typical kinds of changes that we see based on legal wording and so forth, so
Yep.
thank you.
Okay, now more exciting than policy is the financial report. So we're going to jump into the November financial report. And really not a lot has happened since we last met, since we were mid-November and did the big forecast presentation. But just a couple of things to highlight. So first, our cash balance and where we are compared to last November is about $4.6 million above last year at this time. We still are on the downward trend of our cash balance cycle that fluctuates pretty significantly throughout the year. That's part of why maintaining a cash balance is so important, because we do see those fluctuations from month to month as seen in this graph. Looking at revenue collected in the month of November compared to last year, really the only item to highlight is under all other revenue, and that's up about $52,000 above where we were last year. And that's largely due to timing of when we rolled out fees, student fees, which was with the implementation of PowerSchool. So we were just a little bit later on that than we're in the previous year. So that will even out. Will actually be slightly less than prior years due to some of the fees that we eliminated this year. Then year-to-date revenue, local taxes, which includes the income tax, property tax, and public utility, is up about $500,000. A majority of that is related to the income tax, which itself is up about 6.5% over last year. All other, state funding is up, but that's, again, a timing variance of when the state funding formula was implemented last year compared to this year. And then all of our revenue includes the return of advances due to ESSER, so we'll continue to see that as a variance throughout the rest of the year.
And you said income tax is 6.5% year over year?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Year to date.
Year to date.
Yeah, so just for the first 2
Right.
quarters, so for July and October. Yep.
And last year it was up over the previous year.
Yes, it was, I believe, probably at this point about 18% increase over the prior year before that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, on the expenditure side for the month of November, salary and benefits are up as we would expect due to the step and base increases, as well as additional staff that we added this year due to enrollment growth. The other 2 line items are pretty much in alignment with where we were last year, so nothing to note there. Year to date on expenditures, again, salary and benefits related to steps and additional staff. And then all their expenses includes some software material purchases that we didn't have in prior year related to cyber liability requirements, and then HVAC project, what is not covered by ESSER funds is hitting this line item. So that is expected, it's in the forecast, but it's going to be a variance over prior year.
Is most of that paid for already? Is there still a bunch to come?
There is still a portion. What's showing up here is largely just the high school portion. There will be, I believe it's about $500,000 still left on the elementary project that will be paid probably December, January timeframe.
Which is roughly half paid for by the COVID funds or more?
Just on the high school was all paid out of general fund. The elementary was about 2/3 ESSER, 1/3 general fund, if I remember. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay, then jumping to COVID-related funds, so this is ESSER, Coronavirus Relief Fund, IDAB. So in total, over really 3, going on 4 years, we had about 2.9 million. This hasn't changed really at all, so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time here. This just shows a breakdown of how all of our COVID-related funds were spent or will be spent. So I added these descriptions just to the top of this graph to kind of simplify things. So what we have left out of ESSER 2 and 3 is going to be used on summer intervention this coming year. The ARP IDA funds will be used the rest of this year and potentially some of next year on behavior specialists. And then the remaining ESSER funds from the General Assembly allocation are being used on the HVAC project that we talked about, as well as the temporary intervention position that we have in the elementary. We also will be receiving some funds from the Licking County ESC, so we're working with them. I believe it's about $20,000 this year and $20,000 next year. Working with them to see if there's a way that we can maintain that temporary intervention position for next year or supplement in some other way, but we're still working through the details of that, and that will be added up here once we have that finalized.
So I do have a question about the staffing. Could you just go right back to that last one and then kind of on what you were saying? But so that, the money that was spent for staffing, is that something that will then, because obviously the money's not going to be there, it's not continuing, so what will happen with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So staffing was largely positions that we added that were truly needed during COVID. So we had, because of social distancing and class sizes and the remote position, like we had temporary positions last year that went away. So we didn't have to pull them back into general fund. They just were no longer needed based on scheduling and things like that. Then the temporary intervention position that we had last year and this year we still have funding for, so we're keeping it, but it is a limited contract, so it will be a position that's not renewed unless there is, like I said, if the ESC funding can come through and provide the funding for that, we'll continue to have it, otherwise it'll go away. So we did not add anything that would need basically general fund to come in and cover the cost.
Okay.
So we really tried to either cut expenses out of our general fund budget where we could, or out of permanent improvement, like with the facilities improvements, or truly use it for supplemental services that were needed during the time that are no longer needed afterward. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay, then we have our cash reconciliation. Nothing really to mention on that. But then I do have one more slide here. Just wanted to provide a quick update on the Finance Committee that we had last week. So we met on Tuesday, and I shared with them the 5-year forecast that we reviewed in detail at our last meeting, and had some conversation around the income tax to hear their thoughts. And the suggestion there was to do a 5-year straight renewal, so keep the traditional 0.75%, but to do it as a 5-year renewal. So that was kind of what the committee discussed last week. And then going along with that, we also talked about a cash balance policy. So a lot of districts have a cash balance policy, and we have a resolution, a cash balance resolution that we pass, but it's not a formal board policy. That includes a minimum cash balance. So if your forecast dips below or shows that you'll be below a certain threshold, that's when a conversation would be had about putting a new levy on or generating additional revenue in some way. But we could also have a maximum cash balance policy. And so that would help the board determine things like when we maybe have too much cash, we're showing too much cash on hand at any point in time. And you can base it on a variety of different factors, days cash on hand, percent of expenditures, those kinds of things. But it's really important to look at both a minimum and a maximum because we have those fluctuations in cash through the levy cycle year to year, but also month to month. So that was something that the Finance Committee will continue to look at and potentially bring a recommendation to the board in the coming months.
Can you just remind us, the role of the Finance Committee?
Yeah, so the Finance Committee is comprised of Jeff and I, 2 board members, and then community members. And the role of the finance committee is really just to get community input and feedback from a financial perspective. We typically meet at least twice a year to review the 5-year forecast, but we've met more often with the income tax going on, as well as we updated them like on the cooperative strategies presentation that the Intel task force took a look at as well, because that does have a financial aspect to it as well. So it's a community group to get feedback, input. They don't make formal recommendations to the board, but like I said, their feedback, their suggestion is a 5-year renewal. It's not a formal recommendation. There's no votes taken. That's just what several individuals personally expressed during our meeting.
And do they bring information? I know that we asked them for feedback. Do they bring information to people in the community, or you're not sure?
I'm not sure. That was something that we talked a little bit about, that would be helpful, because it is very hard to reach folks with financial information. It's pretty easy to understand once you sit down and have an hour-long conversation, but it's hard to have that one-on-one with everyone in the community. So it's great to have those community members as part of the committee in hopes that they can share that with their individual circles.
Oh, and then I have one more question, okay, all the way back when you were talking about our cash balance, and yes, it does relate to this, but so do you mind going back to that slide?
Yeah.
So in this year, what has our lowest and highest cash balance been so far? Like around 20 and
Yes,
around?
so we are at our lowest cash balance right now, which is about probably 17,000, or 17 million, sorry. And the highest point was a little over 20 million.
And it should dip a little bit.
Yeah, it's gonna go down again in December and potentially in January, depending on timing of a property tax advance payment that may or may not come. Yeah, so this is a typical trend that most school districts see because we receive large amounts of revenue 2 times a year. So there is a pretty significant swing from the high point to the low point. So
for some reason, I didn't pay attention to it.
yeah, so that's why you have want to maintain a certain minimum cash balance throughout the year, is to basically pay bills, pay payroll in between the fluctuations in your revenue payments.
Okay, yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I attended the finance committee meeting as well. It's great to have so many people there. Some of them who have been like long-term, regular, consistent members, so they really understand the long-term history of the schools. And some new members as well, right? Some with great experience and knowledge about school finances, and some that are new to it, that are just trying to offer their perspective and have otherwise good financial insight. So that was a great group. Specifically with the recommendation of a cash balance policy or guideline. Are other school districts in the state of Ohio doing something like that, or what's your understanding? Maybe you could bring back to us some of those things, but maybe when the time comes.
Yeah, so having a cash balance policy, especially a minimum cash balance policy, is very common. It's something that the rating agencies will look for when you're going out to get bonds, so that's another reason why it would be advantageous to have that. It helps your bond rating, which of course over time reduces the cost to the taxpayer of a bond issue. As far as the maximum, that was kind of a new concept to me. There was a consultant that I was talking to that mentioned it, that he's working with some districts on doing. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily as common as the minimum, for sure. But I think in our current environment, it may become more common because districts across the state are seeing higher cash balances because of the ESSER funds. So it may be more common in our current climate.
Okay.
Especially a school district with an income tax, it makes sense as well, because you tend to see greater fluctuation in your income tax revenue because it does adjust with the economic conditions. So there are a lot of more considerations that an income tax district may consider in a policy like that, as opposed to a straight property tax district.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Great. Let's see here. We've reached the time in our agenda where we welcome public comments. So anyone in the audience that would like to step forward, state their name and address, and speak for up to 5 minutes, we welcome your input. You step up the podium if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
My name is Ben Barton. I live on Pinehurst Drive in Granville. I'm probably an outspoken critic of the income tax, more from a, I guess, pragmatic and financial perspective. And I guess the reason being, and from what I've seen the last 3 years, most entities, public and private, tend to want to grow into their budget. And when we have a cash balance that is roughly 30% higher than it was a couple years ago, what I see in my practice and what I see in a lot of government agencies is that you grow the personnel, you grow the benefits, you grow the bonuses, you grow the incomes, you grow all the expenses to fit your budget. And that's a terrible way to run a government or a government school. It doesn't work. I mean, there's no end. Doing a minimum and maximum cash balance plan, I mean, great idea on paper. I don't think it works. I mean, if this income tax raises so much money, I think it surprised everybody. I know it surprised everybody. Maybe not you guys, because you probably saw it coming. But based on what we were told it was going to raise and what it actually raised, it is off the charts. And maybe we see a slight depression coming up, or a recession, where incomes drop and these numbers go down. But from what was asked originally, to cover the gap in expenditures, that was a foreseen deficit. And what it raised, I mean, we are at levels that are unheard of. And it's one thing when you buy a house in Granville or other communities and property taxes are X. But when you come after someone's income, it's a whole different animal. And it's funny because, on paper, 0.75 is no big deal. We can all afford it, supposedly. And property taxes in Granville are high, but relative to everywhere else, it's not terrible. But when you take the mass of an income tax and apply it to this budget, it's too much. It's too long. It's too much. What you need to do is come back with an ask that hits your budget with things you actually need. And if it comes back at 0.25% or 0.33%, ask for that. I mean, the way we got bamboozled by Mike Sobel was embarrassing, and I was part of all that too. I think he knew exactly what he wanted when he came in. I think he knew we'd never get the 1.25 passed. And I think he knew that 0.75 on all income would raise more than 1.25. So be careful what you ask for, and be careful who you ask to help, because if you get all cheerleaders, you're missing about 55% of the community that voted against this thing. And no one's asked anybody I know for help. So FYI. And everyone said that they're going to come out and ask those who were against the levy to come out and provide input. I've got about 60 people on a committee. You're 0 for 60. That's a lot. And we're all outspoken, so we're not hard to find.
It's my understanding that the finance.
We're not going to respond so much.
No, that's
to
fine.
public
That's
comment.
fine.
I'm just trying to address it in public.
Yeah, and I'm okay talking about it too. I mean, I just want to make it clear out there that to come back with the exact same thing, only because the cheerleader said that's what they're more willing to vote for, I think it's a mistake. I mean, I think you're not doing all the homework you need to do. It's a big ask. I mean, you have a big budget, you're up 30% roughly year over year. I mean, well, year over 3 years now. And I'm just worried that you're gonna grow into that budget, and you don't have to. The budget should meet exactly what you need, not a penny more. So, that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, I'll also mention that we do welcome public comment by email or by personal phones or calls or texts or knocking on the door. All of our contact information is available on the board website, as well as the administration here, the treasurer and superintendent have an open door policy for feedback. So thank you for that, and we look forward to keeping in touch. The next item on the agenda is indeed our board discussion. The only item specifically outlined is a levy discussion. Before that, though, I do want to take just one quick minute and bring up a couple other support group things. First of all, I'm not a member of the Granville Education Foundation. I'm not sure if you've been at their local recent meetings, but they've got a couple of things going on now that they're worth highlighting, including an opportunity to contribute to your favorite teacher as a part of the holidays. Right, the GEF has a specific campaign going where instead of just buy an apple for the teacher for the holidays, you can visit the Granville Education Foundation website and make a contribution with a comment that gets directed to your classroom teacher or one of your favorite teachers in the districts. I thought that was worth highlighting. Any other updates from booster organizations or other items before we talk about the
I would add to the GEF, that also kicks off their winter grant submissions for teachers as well. So
yeah.
they go through that process leading up to the winter break. And then right before winter break, their grant cycle for teachers for innovative projects opens up and ends in late January, early February usually. So
Yeah, thanks for having that.
Our superintendent committees open to the public?
Absolutely. We have 5, 6 different
Yes.
superintendent committees that are open to the public, right? And if you have an inclination or interest in joining any one of those, people are always welcome.
Yeah,
Maybe
so
for the
the-
January meeting, we can review those a little bit and extend a more formal invitation, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I was gonna say that, the finance meeting that you just had, was that open to the public?
Yes,
So like potentially all the people could have come to that?
well, what I'll clarify is that they're not public meetings, like a Board of Education meeting that is publicly posted and noticed and minutes and agenda and like our board meetings are, so it's not like that. But anybody who would want to be on the list to be invited to those meetings
Yeah, so maybe
is
we can
certainly
make a
welcome.
connection there, Mr. Barton. I think that sounds like a good idea. And also, I'm not talking properly right now because I just got expanders put in my mouth, so I sound funny. But we're having a whole child committee meeting this Wednesday, so that's open to, it's from 6 to, like, I don't know. 6:30? Okay, it's in this district office upstairs. For anybody who'd like to come, that's, again, the whole child committee. Misty, are you going to that? Okay, I'll be there too, assuming my cold is like all the way gone.
I would just add, and Jeff has shared this before, anybody interested can contact Janelle, just call the district office,
Yeah.
740-587-8101, and she'll put you in contact with the administrator who runs that particular committee.
Great.
Thank you.
And I know that in the GEF meeting, the Granville Education Foundation meeting, there was a lot of talk about the levy. And, I mean, there was there was nothing that came out of it necessarily, but it was a big topic of conversation in terms of, are we going to grow, or it began with a conversation about, are we going to grow our organization? Are we going to raise more funds? What will we use those funds for if we do that? And then, of course, levy conversation came up in terms of, we ask, Granville Education Foundation asks community members, and they feel like they're generally willing to give, but then when it comes to a vote for a levy, then a levy is voted down. So there was just it was just an interesting conversation. And I think that levy conversations, it feels like to me, maybe it's because I'm constantly asking people, and I actually do feel like I'm getting to be that boring person at the party that like, why is this woman again asking about levies? But I do feel like that's kind of what I've been doing for the last month. I don't know if we want to transit. I could definitely transition us
I would love to hear
towards-
about that, because we all kind of have the homework to talk to as many people
Yeah,
as
I
possible.
did. I
I'd
feel
love
like
to
I
hear it.
reached out, so I did specifically reach out to people that I knew were not supporters of this levy. And some people didn't necessarily want to communicate with me, and then others one person said, well, I'm a no vote no matter what, but put me in touch with other people, and then one woman I spoke to recently said that she felt like the information wasn't clear enough in terms of data that was given, and in terms of, basically data. She wanted more information on what specifically is the value of this levy. So I thought, I'm of two minds. I feel like we're here month after month after month. I came to board meetings starting, I think, in 2018. I wasn't a board member, so I've been listening to these conversations for, a number of years, and I feel like I really do have a good grasp of it, but not everyone does that. So that's just something that I think we need to really figure out, how we can communicate what we hear once a month for years and years and years, maybe how we can communicate that better. And then figuring out, again, like Mr. Barton, I kind of appreciate that you pointed out that there's this whole group of people who have this opinion, but I feel like I couldn't really find them. Maybe, I don't know, if I was looking in the wrong places. I wasn't going on Facebook and just cold calling people, so, but there's got to be a way to make a better connection, and maybe that's just a community problem in general. We're not talking to each other if we're not agreeing. I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we should connect, and I'd be really interested to hear your guys' perspective as well. So I'd like to attend the next finance meeting, but if you could get in touch with Brittany and maybe you can find out some information about when you can meet. Sorry to give you more work, but of course we want to hear everybody's perspectives. So I think there's just, we haven't timed the connection, and we need to make a stronger effort to connect and meet more people. So we would love to have you guys come to the next meeting.
It goes both ways. I mean, maybe we should reach out, but more information, and I know it's all on site, but you need to put it out there. Because the website is manageable, but it's not, you gotta know what you're looking for to know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
We'll find a time to connect again and see if we can find a way to include those things. Specifically, are there other board members that had a chance to talk to folks in the last month to get a sense since the election, what the impressions have been, and that might guide our decisions tonight?
Nothing different from what I heard that I presented last time, so.
Well, I've reached out and met with some folks from the Common Sense Coalition, and I found them very reasonable and approachable and willing to be more involved. So I feel like, I was encouraged with the conversation and that they want to be involved. So we're going to make sure, at least I'm going to make sure that they're more involved going forward. Because at least as a board member, I received the message on election night, plain and simple. So, I'm going to do my part to do whatever we can to make sure that we still continue to offer the best product for our kids.
I must say, I kind of feel like I have been a little bit of a stalker the last month. And I've been going out to Facebook and finding people who spoke up against the levy and specifically messaging them and contacting them and texting people. And I've had 20 coffee chats over the last month, specifically just reaching out to folks. Specifically, I've talked to a half a dozen people who financially funded the opposition campaign, right, to try and understand their perspective. Right? And I heard really loud and clear that the permanent continuing aspect of the levy was a major challenge for people. Right? A lot of folks are concerned about what the future holds and things like that, and we're not comfortable signing up for that kind of permanent thing. So that's really guided a lot of my thoughts, is that specific feedback that was consistent along those lines. The second thing I heard was about communication and details and information. In that case, it seems like many people have different specific questions. Some of them about the revenue side, some about expenses, some of them about, capital projects, some of them about when the next bond issue is, some of them about how levy cycles work. And so there's a lot of information to convey out there. I'm really proud that we have completely transparent financial information that's available, but it's unfortunately hard to find because our financial reports are very long. You know, a full forecast is a long document that has a lot of information. You can't sort of skip any piece of it, right? Because if you skip a piece of it, that's the piece that someone wanted out there. So in my 20 different conversations for an hour with a lot of different people, each one sort of had different good questions about some different nuance about, you know, why it has to be 20% or of our revenue, or, you know, how it's become that, or what other components are, or the other taxing mechanisms that are possible, or shouldn't we go back to property taxes, or all those different questions, which are good questions that show folks are thinking about it. And folks do think about it at levy time. But many folks have not thought about it much for the last 4 years, right, since we haven't had a levy. So, you know, we just need to engage in those conversations. But the thing I did hear, you know, loud and clear from the most people was they were not supportive of permanent, but they would be supportive of a term. I mentioned the reasons why I prefer a 10-year term, but I understand that's beyond what people feel is comfortable. And I am to the point where I think a 5-year term is appropriate. Because it is, again, the same as what we've done before. It's not a change or an increase in the tax rate. It's the same term as we've had before. And I think if we try and change things and go for 10 years instead of 5, or change the tax base, or change some other mechanism associated with it, it's complicated, right? And because the primary feedback that I've heard was permanent was the biggest challenge, I think that's the thing we need to clearly address. And I'm not sure if any of you have kind of ideas specifically on the term, because that's the thing that we left open since the last meeting to be completed at our action item today. But I've come around to that as the thing that I believe the community will support. And that's so important right now, so we can continue to have this revenue, which is our operating revenue to pay for our staff primarily. But again, I'm all ears, right? And I know, you know, in addition to coming up with general communication about our finances, people are eager to hear a long-term plan. We have a lot of change coming our way. We know Intel is going to do growth. We know that you know, real estate prices are changing, and I think we owe it to ourselves and the community to communicate a good strategic long-term plan that is going to be forthcoming from the results of the strategic task force and our models and things that we'll be putting together in the spring before the levy. Any other good feedback from constituents? Have folks reached specifically on this?
Nothing different.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, thank you very much for your comments this evening. Again, looking forward to engaging with all in the community to help us just come up with the right sustainable model for our schools going forward. Right? That's so important. It's such a core part of our community. And with all the change that's happening or is impending to happen around us, I just feel more and more confident. I think we're going to come out very well in Granville. We have a long history of great culture in our community. Much of it surrounds education, but also the other values that we have that make this a great place to live. I'm really supportive of and excited to be a part of going forward. So thanks for all your input. Anything else for board discussion that people have to think about? Okay. I suggest we move on to the action agenda. Do you want to walk us through that, Brittany? Or Brian?
Yes, first item in the action agenda is 10.01, President Pro Tem for the January 2023 organizational meeting.
So moved.
Second.
And this is to establish Mr. Miller for President Pro Tem for the organizational meeting, where you'll select President and Vice President for the 2023 calendar year.
Questions? Roll, please.
Ms. Shaw? Aye. Mr. Wool?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds? Aye. Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Next item on the agenda is 10.02, approval of the agreement with the Learning Spectrum.
So moved.
Second.
We have a long history of working with the Learning Spectrum for our special needs students, and this is a contract to provide services for students for the second half of the year.
Where are they located?
Johnstone.
Down, yeah.
Thank you.
No? Any discussion? Thank you.
Ms. Shaw? Aye. Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Wool?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Okay, item 10.03 is approval of student travel behavior guidelines.
Second.
I just want to say this is a proactive measure, not a measure of anything or instance that we have because we haven't traveled in a few years. But travel is picking back up, and you'll see that in the board agenda. There's a couple trips that you'll be asked for your approval with tonight. And it's just been recommended, best practice, proactive approach, that we are very clear with students and families about our expectations when students travel, especially when our student code of conduct maybe doesn't match the social norms in the countries that we're visiting for different things. So just being clear and upfront and using those guidelines to make sure there are no miscommunications.
Yeah, I looked over some of these guidelines. I think it makes a lot of sense, right? And again, the more we can go into these experiences with clear rules and guidelines out there, the better they are for all the participants. Any other questions? Roll, please.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 10.04 is approval to join the Ohio School Boards Association.
So moved.
Second.
I don't have anything to add except I think you all know what OSBA is. So.
Great organization, really helps us out a lot with policy management and so forth, so, yes.
Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 10.05 is the approval to join the Ohio School Boards Association Legal Assistance Fund.
So moved.
Second.
So we've certainly used that legal assistance fund over the years for different things that have popped up, and it's been a benefit to our district and to our taxpayers.
Thank you. The roll, please.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Okay, for the consent agenda, I'd like approval of 11.01A through C10. C10 is the addendum, and C7 also had an addendum.
So moved.
Second.
Before we take a vote, I'd like to point out a few things. We want to thank the donations and grants that we received, $15,000 from Denison University. It's part of their annual donation to different things that we do here in the district, which much appreciated. Some donations to the Rogerson Scholarship Fund, a school bus purchase grant of $45,000, and a foundation grant of $70,000 that we received through different donations or grants that we applied for.
And I'll
Those
just
are
add-
both really significant. Can you
Yeah.
make a mention of those?
Yeah, so
Those
the
are great.
school bus purchase grant was part of this biennium budget, and it's based on data that we submit to the state on our buses, based on the age and mileage of our buses. And then the state has a certain allocation that they awarded to districts. The most was $45,000 per bus. So basically, we can use this $45,000 to purchase part of a bus, because a bus costs much more than $45,000. But it will be a direct savings to our permanent improvement fund that would have otherwise had to incur the full cost. So that's great. And then the Hillsdale Foundation grant is for the athletic department, and it's actually, the total amount is $100,000, but we're splitting it kind of with the boosters, so they're taking directly $30,000 to do some direct work with students. This is for mental health support for student athletes and coaches. And so that first amount was received by the boosters already. I believe the second award will be made in April timeframe, and then largely the program will be put into place over the next school year. So
Special thanks to Josh Duvall, our athletic director, for coordinating that and for prioritizing the student health and wellness of all of our student athletes.
Yeah.
It makes a big difference, I think, in these funds. I think will be very well used to continue that cultural advancement of our student athletes.
So the 30,000 that the boosters already got, that's for the health, like?
it's for like incentives, like things that are more booster oriented expenditures, whereas like the $70,000, some of that is going to be salaries for different support positions that we're going to pay that needs to run through the districts. So it's more of a logistics of which expenditures make sense for the boosters to cover. If it's going to be things like gift card, incentives, like those kinds of things are more booster oriented as opposed to district. So we're splitting it up that way.
Okay.
But it's all tied into
But it's
this
all-
mental health initiative.
Yep, it's all one grant. They just are allowing us to basically facilitate it through both organizations as we see most appropriate.
Okay, that's nice.
Yep.
Have you decided which part of the bus you're buying?
Yeah, the front half.
Just curious
Yeah.
which part you're buying.
I'd also like to point out, we have a couple of retirements. Nancy Nesbitt will be leaving us on June 1st. Nancy's been here a long time, serving a role as an intervention specialist for the district and a reading specialist as well. And she kind of wore a lot of hats during her time here in Granville Schools. And I personally have enjoyed working with her, and we will certainly miss her, but I'm excited for the next stage of her life, and I know she is too. And also Paul Reed recently submitted his resignation as bus driver, so we certainly appreciate that and know that those things are hard to come by, but best of luck to him and what's next as well. And then finally, wrapping up the consent agenda, we have the field trips I talked about. One is for the girls basketball team to travel to Norton, Ohio, just for overnight for a game. And then the Latin students going to Italy and Greece, and that's, we're starting to ramp up student travel again, so I'm sure you'll see more of these in the near future.
I only have one question about that. Can I go?
There was a note that just came out today that said they are open to parent chaperones as well, but the slots are filling up fast.
Mr. Derek Fisher, the Latin teacher at the high school, will be your point of contact for that.
And I will point out that it is entirely student and family funded.
Okay.
Right, so be ready to pay the bill if you're interested. But it sounds like a wonderful experience.
I just want to thank all the substitutes. I feel like every time we're here, we have substitutes, and I recognize community members' names, and I really appreciate that. I know that really helps the school function in winter, especially.
Yeah.
And I would add too, what we're seeing is some of the students that maybe graduate in December and aren't starting a job until the summer are coming back to help us out, which is great. It's good to see their faces again, but also in a totally different capacity is, it's really neat to see that kind of circle of education coming back, so.
Yeah, that's great.
Are they coming back as substitutes?
Yes, but not necessarily as teachers, just they have a degree and to kind of fill a gap before they start their employment. And we will certainly utilize their services.
That's nice, yeah.
Great. Any more questions on the consent agenda? Please.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Okay, that brings us to item 12.01, approval of the November 22 financial report.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? I appreciate this, especially just the highlights, the little text bubbles you put on there and things like that and so forth. That helps highlight some of those things and so forth. And it's always nice to know that the numbers match at the end of the day. So thanks for all your good work there.
Thank you.
Good roll.
Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Item 12.02, resolution requesting certification of alternative tax rates for renewal income tax.
So moved.
I didn't understand this.
Do we have a second so we can discuss it?
Oh,
Thank
sorry.
you.
Second.
Okay, so this is the first of the two-step process that we have to take in order to put the income tax renewal on the ballot again in May. So this is the same resolution we passed in June.
Oh, okay.
And so last month, we talked about bringing forward this resolution, and that we would then verbally fill in what the duration is going to be. So it sounds like from board discussion that we will put forward a 5-year 0.75 income tax renewal on. So that is what this
Okay.
resolution is for. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. I forgot.
That's okay.
Any more discussion on that? I feel this is definitely the right thing to do right now for the community. We clearly heard that permanent is not the right thing. We heard many people say that they would support something that's 5 years, so I think this is the right thing to move forward with.
And I really do hope that more community members do come to the meetings, because I know it's so much more difficult to understand the finances when you're just reading it on slides or on the website. It's so much easier to understand when you're having an in-person conversation about it. So I do I know that it can't be a lower rate, but community members need to understand that too. And I think if they can come and talk about it in person, they'll have a better understanding of that. Because really, we've looked at all the numbers and you've done all the research, you've changed numbers, and that rate is really what we need. So I hope to meet more community members, and please feel free to reach out to any of us. My phone number, my email address is listed on the website, and I'd be happy to meet anybody.
Thank you. The roll.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Okay, item 12.03, approval of the permanent appropriation resolution.
So moved. Second.
So we are updating based on the 2 grants that we approved earlier in the consent agenda.
That's fantastic. I'd love to improve with more money coming in please, from outside.
Okay.
Roll.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Item 12.04, approval of insurance consultant contract.
So moved.
Second.
Last year, we went through the RFP process for our health insurance consultant contract, and we had various stakeholders involved. The GEA was involved with representation, and we decided to extend our contract with Gallagher last year. This year, recommending this extension again based on them being absolutely instrumental in the 8% reduction in insurance that we're receiving for 2023. So we have been happy with the services that they've provided, so we're recommending extension of that contract for another year.
Yeah, being able in these days to have a reduction in your health insurance rate, not to mention having a cap on it for the next 2 years, feels really good. We have enough uncertainty in the system and things like that. We've been challenged enough there in the past, as have many people with the rising cost of healthcare, that I'm pleased that we're able to negotiate a very favorable rate for this year and the future ones to lock that in. Yeah. Any questions? Roll, please.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye. Thank you all for coming. Meeting adjourned.